I need eyes on Red now!
Study negative.
Mistletoe hydroponics negative.
He's not in the gallery.
Nick! Reach!
We have a breach!
Now, here, make it
Red One is the 2024 holiday action movie from Amazon MGM Studios and Dwayne Johnson 7 Buck Productions. The logo for $7 is just so bad. When the movie started, I was like, you can tell this is a Dwayne Johnson production. Also, you can tell Dwayne Johnson is not Tom Cruise. There's scenes in this where he's running, and it looks like he's just running in place. More on that later. Red One, I always knew was going to be a disaster. This movie was announced back in 2022. It was supposed to come out last Christmas, but due to the writer's strike, among other issues, apparently there were behind-the-scenes issues with Dwayne Johnson being late, more on that later. But this movie was supposed to come out last Christmas. All in all, it took more than a year for this movie to finally hit theaters. It's coming out tomorrow and Friday, and it just looks so fucking bad. I saw this at an early access screening on Sunday in IMAX. Red One is being released in fucking IMAX screens, people. The Rock is even, of course he is, he's comparing this to Oppenheimer. Like, why wouldn't he? But the point is, Red One is not even so bad it's good action. It's not like Venom: The Last Dance, where it's just so incomprehensibly bad. You laugh at it. This movie is bad, but it isn't so bad it's good bad. It is boring bad. There are good elements in here, but overall, this is a pretty cool concept that I think just goes to waste. It is a 2-hour movie, and you're following two characters who are probably the most boring characters in this universe that they introduce. Like, you have this whole world with Santa and elves and Christmas, and it's this modern, cool version of trying to explain how they spend all 365 days a year prepping for Christmas, yet you spend none of the time on that. You spend the time with the most dull characters doing the most boring shit. Let's talk about that today. Because when the trailer first came out for Red One back in July, I was seeing twisters when I saw this. I knew this movie was coming out. I'd pretty much known what the concept was and that it was going to involve Santa Claus and J.K. Simmons, Lucy Liu, Chris Evans, Dwayne Johnson were in it, but I didn't know what the movie was actually about. And then when I saw the trailer, I just immediately thought, this looks so ugly. There is no chemistry. It didn't seem like there's actually anything really cool. And just everything about it, from the heroes to the villains, to the story, to the visuals, to the presentation, the technical elements just suck. So let's talk about today why Red One is an absolute failed movie. Now, some of the big things about Red One is this is a very confused genre. This movie is supposed to be an action movie, but it has very little action. The action is terrible looking, and there isn't even a ton of it. There is a really cool action scene in concept where Dwayne Johnson is trying to save Santa Claus. That's the thing I mentioned, where it looks like Tom Cruise fake running. It's just so bad. Dwayne Johnson obviously is not an action star. It looks like he's on a treadmill, like that scene where Wonder Woman is running in place. That's exactly how it looks in this. It looks so fake. And I think this could have been a really cool scene where Dwayne Johnson's trying to rescue Santa Claus. The way it's presented is pretty cool too. Like, he's doing all these stunts. He's jumping across rooftops, kind of like Aquaman in Italy when he's trying to chase Black Manta. He's trying to save Santa, but it's just such an ugly scene. None of it feels real. And then on top of it, all the action you're getting in this, and this is marketed as an action movie, is just boring. They save the really good stuff to the end, but it's only 1 minute. Like, at the end, they show you how Santa goes down the chimney and how he uses the shrinking technology to do that. Why do they wait till the very end to give you something that's actually cool, that actually could be really just interesting to watch? I do think the shrinking technology in this movie is cool, but it's barely used. So the fact that they wait till the very end to actually give you a really cool scene where they just show how Santa does his Christmas night, how he goes, they say like every night he burns, or every Christmas he burns 430 million calories traveling the world, delivering to each kid. It's such a cool idea, and they don't show it till the end. That just pissed me off. Which brings me to the pacing. The pacing in this is so bad. Like, there are plenty of scenes where they are introducing characters and then they cut right away to another scene. And I think this really could have been a good movie had it given its characters some backstory or some motivation. The first scene in this is a brief flashback to little Chris Evans' character, where you see him as a kid, and they're trying to give you his backstory, see how he became the character he is, but it's so quick. And then they cut to 33 years later, and you see Chris Evans, but it's not like you spend any time with him. It then cuts right away to Dwayne Johnson. So we really spend no time with our characters. And as a result, it just feels like they are these empty shells. They don't feel like characters. You don't really feel motivation for Chris Evans. You know he is this cocky guy who doesn't believe in Christmas, who's a thief, but you don't really see why he became a thief or this master tracker. You don't see why he is like this, really. You just know as a kid he was a bit of a douche. He didn't believe in Santa, and that's all they give you. I just wish you had more motivation. You had maybe some emotional reason to care for him. You know that he doesn't have parents or he's staying with his cousins, as they say in the flashback, but like, they don't emphasize that beyond one sentence. I just wish we had some reason to care for Chris Evans. And I know that not every movie needs to give you some deep emotional backstory, but at least give us something to latch onto. Like the other really shitty movie with Dwayne Johnson, Red Notice, tried to do this and they just failed so bad, where Ryan Reynolds is trying to give Dwayne Johnson some like exposition about a watch his dad gave him, and it's just so trite, and it's just like a quick monologue. That movie did a shitty job with backstory, but I just wish these movies gave proper backstory. They don't need to cram it into like one monologue. Just make it good. Make these characters feel like characters. It's like they're not even trying. And then there's the same thing with Callum Drift, who's Dwayne Johnson's character. This is that thing that Jumanji does, but it doesn't do it as well as Jumanji. See, Jumanji gives all of its characters arcs, and it's interesting because this is the same director of Jumanji. I think even if in Jumanji the arcs they give their characters are very cliche, like high school characters, like you have the jock, the popular girl, the nerd, it's right out of The Breakfast Club. At least they have story arcs. In this movie, they give no arc, no motivation. Dwayne Johnson is briefly at the beginning talking about how he's losing his motivation. And the movie opens right on him being Santa Claus's bodyguard. I think it is a cool, funny concept. Like, I'm looking at this like a movie like Elf. Elf is obviously not some high concept, really serious movie. It's a very silly movie about an elf, a human who's raised in the North Pole as an elf, and you see how he has this true belief that he's an elf. This movie could have done something like that, but unlike Elf, you have no human connection. You don't understand where Dwayne Johnson's coming from. It's not like he has a family somewhere you know he came from. You don't see how he came to be this bodyguard in the North Pole, so he doesn't feel like a character. When at the beginning he's talking to Santa and saying, and it's very funny, by the way, guys, he's like, people have been so naughty this year, and they're playing this emotional, sentimental music, and Dwayne Johnson with a straight face is just talking to J.K. Simmons. He's like, why are people so bad? More than ever, I feel that people are bad and not good. And it's just so funny because he's talking about kids on the naughty list, and it's like trying to be serious, but at the same time, we have no knowledge of who Dwayne Johnson is. So it's just this random guy, Callum Drift, that's his name, sounds like a porn star name, saying, I hate how bad children have become. Like, out of context, it's so weird, and you just have no backstory. You know that he's Santa's bodyguard, but that's all you know. And we know he's Dwayne Johnson. That isn't enough. The only motive they give Dwayne Johnson's character is to show that he is losing hope and he's Santa Claus's bodyguard. That's not enough. The same backstory goes for Santa and the North Pole, which would be such a cool world to live in and to invest our time in, but we barely spend any time in it. The whole movie is this wild goose chase plot, and that sucks because there is such a cool Christmas element here that I wanted to see, but the movie just kind of shoves that away to give us scenes where they go to Aruba and to Krampus and flying around. I really wish the Krampus scene, which felt a bit long, was cut down. Basically, they just go there to bring Krampus into the story, but it feels like they spend so long there. I did like the practical effects in this scene, but they don't spend any time in this Christmas world. And like I mentioned, the very end of the film, they show what could have been. They show how Santa does Christmas every year, how he shrinks himself and how he goes into every chimney, how they have a whole deployment team of elves to like fix lights if they get broken. That should have been the movie. The main focus of the movie, even if it wasn't Christmas night, should have at least had Christmas elements in it. There's so much time spent doing other stuff adjacent to Christmas. It's like, what's the point of making a $250 million Christmas movie if you're barely going to spend any time with that stuff in it? Also, for a movie of this scale, I do like the villains they're dealing with. They have this one villain, Grilla, who has this place in Nordic culture. She's a witch. I looked her up. And they got Kiernan Shipka to play her. I do like Kiernan Shipka. And I think with what she was given, she does a decent job, but it's not her fault. The role that she's just given is so bland and so boring. She has to deliver the most cringe, basic villain dialogue. And what's even worse is we really just have no backstory for her either. She just wants to stop Christmas. She wants to trap all the naughty kids in a snow globe because it's her time. She deserves this. There's really no reason for why she even kidnapped Santa Claus in the first place. She just does. No one seems to know, even though they have this whole security team with fucking Lucy Liu. Like, if Lucy Liu's job in this, by the way, her name's Zoe Harlow. They never emphasize her name as Harlow, but it's just funny to me because on the posters at our early access screening, they had like names for everyone. Anyway, I just find it makes no sense that you have this entire task force dedicated to making sure that Christmas goes off without a hitch. You have a bodyguard for Santa Claus, and then somehow he's not fucking in the room when Kiernan Shipka and like her witch people come in and kidnap him. Like, it makes no sense. The pacing is just so fucking bad. And like I mentioned earlier, where you start with Chris Evans and then it cuts to show you Dwayne Johnson, and then you like ignore Chris Evans fully and you almost forget he's in the movie for like the first 20 minutes. Then it goes back to him. And then they show Kiernan Shipka for like a minute. She's just outside of the North Pole and she says something like, "We're almost there, lads." And then it cuts and you see that like Santa's been kidnapped. Like, you have no backstory for her. It's just so incredibly frustrating that this movie is so fucking bad at its pacing. The movie could have opened with a backstory where we understand where she's coming from. Maybe she has a reason to do this because Santa punishes her or locks her away in some pocket dimension in a snow globe. I don't know. But then maybe she has a motivation to lock people in snow globes herself. Snow globe. Sorry, this movie is making me have a stroke. But because there's no reason, she just wants to torture all the naughty people, it just comes off as incredibly random. And like there's no agency, motivation, or reason behind it. So therefore, when the heroes, Chris Evans and Dwayne Johnson, are trying to stop her, you don't feel like there's really any reason we should. Chris Evans has some son introduced again. Terrible pacing. They introduced this son character so like a half hour into the movie, and then the son character doesn't even come back till like an hour in, and then Chris Evans, because his son's on the naughty list and Kiernan Shipka's character is trying to kidnap him, then Chris Evans has some motivation to save his son. But the problem is, there's been no evidence that Chris Evans even gives a shit that he has a son. He actively says, "I don't care, I'm not a good dad." And then when the kid's in danger, he's just like, "I've been a terrible father, I have to save you." But like, stop. Compare this to a movie like Elf, where you have this constant presence of James Caan and Will Ferrell together. They're constantly riffing. They're constantly on screen, and through that, them kind of fighting, they learn to love each other. And there's this really genuine bond and love. And on top of that, Christmas action and Christmas related elements. This movie has everything that movie doesn't have. You don't feel a sense of connection. You don't feel like the characters really earned that relationship. Chris Evans and his son, it feels like they're not even father and son. And also then the Christmas stuff on top of it doesn't feel like Christmas stuff. We spend so much time going to Aruba, to Krampus's mansion, doing all of this government and bureaucratic stuff that really doesn't seem Christmas related. It's just so boring. Had they stuck with the whole spy, bodyguard, ELF, like talking polar bear thing, but they like had it be in a Christmas setting, I feel like it could have been slightly better. And on top of all of that, the buddy chemistry never works, which is probably the movie's biggest flaw. Like the big selling point, which is two heroes teaming up to save someone or save Christmas, just never feels believable. And I think because they're missing that, the movie totally suffers. Like, look at Jumanji. I think the benefit of Jumanji and why that movie worked is you had The Rock bouncing off of Jack Black, Kevin Hart, Karen Gillan, and all those actors were bouncing off each other. There was just such great chemistry in Jumanji. Yeah, Jumanji was very silly. It was cliched, but it was well written. It had funny moments that worked because you had all these really funny actors doing their thing, and it worked. This movie feels like no one is on the same page, And as a result, it doesn't work. Chris Evans and Dwayne Johnson don't feel like they have any chemistry at all. And I really do think this was a role, the Chris Evans role, originally intended for Ryan Reynolds. And he and The Rock just don't really hit it off. And also, they never get anywhere where they kind of both achieve what they want. Chris Evans just happens to end up taking care of the kid because it's forced upon him. But it's not really he ever wants to do it. It's not like he really even feels like it matters. And then The Rock being able to get his kind of hope or optimism back at the end also doesn't feel that earned. And the way they resolve Dwayne Johnson's arc is the most just frustrating and stupid thing ever, because it's not like he has an arc to begin with. He just is literally told by Santa. Santa's like, oh, you want that thing where you see everyone as a kid and you don't look at people like negative adults. And Dwayne Johnson even says that like adults are what ruins Christmas, the greed. And I do like the line Santa gives him when he says like, one day you'll be able to see everyone as the kid they are. That's who we work for. We work for the kids. It's actually a pretty good line in a Christmas movie, but just how they pay it off is so stupid. At the end, Dwayne Johnson's on the sled and he sees Chris Evans and like his son bonding, and he sees Chris Evans as a child, and he's like, I finally am able to see people for the kids they are. And it's just so weird. It's not even that it's weird that like he's a kid. It's just, this is all Dwayne Johnson was meant for, to like see the hope again, I guess. But his arc is just nothing. It's so empty. They should have had more chemistry with him and Garcia the polar bear. I seriously loved Garcia the polar bear. I don't know why, but I do feel like there are so many elements here that they should have played with more or dialed up. The snowmen, Garcia, just everything related to Christmas there. I feel like there's an alternate version of this movie that was written by people who like actually really care about making a great Christmas action comedy. The one thing here that like has potential as it is Krampus. I mean, there's so much they could have done with Krampus alone, but it just feels like it's one scene in one room, and they don't really do that much with it. I wish they did stuff though with the snowman, with the talking polar bear, just with all the elements they have to make a great Christmas movie. It's shocking they don't do any of that. I just wish the characters in this felt like characters you could invest your time in, but they're not like that. Dwayne Johnson at the end gets his hope back, but so what? It's not like he has this reason we should care about him. He has no family. He has no home life we have ever seen. I mean, this dude could live alone and be totally content, but at least show that. At least show that he has made a friend. They don't even show that him and Chris Evans are going to be buddies. That's like the big flaw. Like, if you're gonna end with this, why not show that Dwayne Johnson and Chris Evans are now pals? Show that he's gonna recruit him for his team, that they're gonna start something. Or at least, I don't want Red 1 2, but at least feel like this has earned something. It just doesn't feel like we accomplish anything. Yes, Christmas is saved, but so what? Like, you could tell me going in, oh, they saved Santa at the end. Like, I would be like, no shit. It's a Dwayne Johnson, awful looking Christmas action movie. But how they go about it is just so bland and cliche. If they had done it in a unique way or had funny jokes along the way, things you couldn't predict, that you couldn't spoil for me, I would like it better. But just the fact that nothing interesting happens along the way, the movie ends without even the two main characters kind of like coming to terms or becoming friends, it just feels like there's no point to anything. This movie ends and you don't feel that sense of satisfaction you might feel when you're watching Avengers and you see them save the city and you feel that triumph. Yeah, in this, Dwayne Johnson and Chris Evans come together to save Santa, and they do, but it's not satisfying. It's not like it feels like anything was worthwhile. That's why it's so important to have your characters, your story beats, your music, your pacing. Everything should relate to the main subject, in this case, a Christmas story about trying to save Santa, and it should work. There are so many things in here that feel jumbled together. And like, these things come from completely different tonal backgrounds, but they try to merge them, and that's just what does not work. I think at the end of the day, a huge issue here, aside from pacing, is character. Every single character in this movie contrasts with each other, and that could usually make for a great film. I think irony is so important in stories. Look at Wednesday, the TV show. That is incredibly successful because of irony. The best parts about that are seeing Jenna Ortega being so dark and so subtly funny and deadpan, and interacting with all the bubbly people like her roommate, Emma Meyer. But in Red 1, none of the chemistry works. None of the characters' goals are aligned, so nothing ever feels like it's going anywhere interesting. For example, Lucy Liu works for this fictional government agency, kind of like a magical version of the CIA. And it would be funny if she was the only serious one because she comes off as very serious, very in control and in charge, a serious boss who wants to get the job done right. And then you have Dwayne Johnson, who has similar goals, who's Santa Claus's right-hand man, and with that, you could get some more interesting perspectives. You have someone who knows Santa up close, someone who works with him and knows everything about Christmas. And it could be fun to see him and Lucy Liu interacting, but they never really do unless she's giving him instructions. Lucy Liu's character is pretty much just a plot device to be able to give them instructions, to be able to send Dwayne Johnson on missions, and he does. And then there's Chris Evans' character, who's kind of this wisecracking Joker guy who has a good skill, which is tracking people, and they need him to find Santa. And then Dwayne Johnson and him have to work together, and it should work because they have these two completely opposing forces coming together. But the reason it doesn't work is simply because these characters have no backstory. You can't have a character without motivation. You can't have motivation without character. In the show Wednesday, you're very aware that Wednesday and her roommate, played by Emma Meyer, have a lot of differences. But because they have a similar goal, they work together to overcome them. And in the process, they end up forming some similarities. And they become closer and stronger as a result. But it's not like in Red 1, there's ever a moment where Chris Evans and Dwayne Johnson realize they have a similar goal. They just always are kind of stuck together doing this job because Chris Evans is the best tracker and because Lucy Liu brings him in, so they have to work together. It's not like it ever really dawns on Dwayne Johnson that Chris Evans will help him. It's not like Chris Evans ever really feels like he needs The Rock either. There really is just no point to them teaming up. They team up, and usually in these movies, that brings out something in the two. In the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie, Wolverine learns to heal and to become better through Deadpool. And it's really emotional. You have this guy who suffered so much, who really didn't like hanging out with Deadpool at all, but now they've teamed up and they formed an alliance. They're a buddy team, and it gives you a little bit of joy to know that this guy who once suffered through all this shit is now happy and has a friend. And there's a little bit of an upbeat moment in that. But in Red 1, you get none of that. They give none of them backstory. Chris Evans' backstory is barely there. It's at the very beginning just to show he's always been on the naughty list, but it's not like you have any reason to help him or to feel for him. It honestly would have been nice if, let's say, in Chris Evans' childhood, he had a really shitty parent, or he never got the Christmas he wanted, and maybe Dwayne Johnson made him see that Christmas is something that everyone deserves. He tries to kind of help him, like with his son, but the whole son angle is so fucking stupid. Like, it's really a pick or choose. You could give Chris Evans a son to care about and make that most of the goal, kind of get rid of the backstory with him, just make it like he's trying to reunite with his son, and that could have been the through line for Chris Evans' character. Dwayne Johnson's trying to help him. He doesn't want to face it. They do that barely, but they do like the bare minimum of that. They really needed to invest or just have you care about the character. Make the son a bigger part of the movie. Have multiple moments where Chris Evans is a douche father, and then at the end he realizes he's been a douche and goes above and beyond to save his son. That would have been way more emotionally impactful than just having him pretty much ignore the fact that he has a son until the son FaceTimes him and is like, "Hey dad, someone sent me a magic snow globe." And then he's like, "I have to save my son." But until that, he literally has not given a shit. The movie doesn't kick in until it needs it to. It doesn't actually spend the time building the story to do that. Or, as I was saying, they could have just cut the son character altogether and focused on Chris Evans trying to have the Christmas he never had as a kid. I don't know, they just should have gone with one or two of those options. They kind of try to do both, but the thing with the son just doesn't work. And try to give Dwayne Johnson some backstory too. I'm fine making Dwayne Johnson this kind of tough loner, but at least give him more motivation. Give him a life outside of Santa Claus. I want to see what he does on the weekends, what his normal life when he's not with Santa Claus is like at the North Pole. That's what this movie is missing. It's missing stuff outside of the plot that's related to Christmas that just could have made this a Christmas classic. This seriously could have been a great Christmas movie if it had just provided us more Christmas details. Show us the North Pole, show us the little towns and the factories and all the bits and pieces of what goes into making Christmas Christmas. There's a really cool bit in here where they're saying they work 364 days a year to make sure that one day, Christmas is the day that goes great. I really wish they had just spent a whole bunch at the beginning dealing with that and then gone into the kidnapping stuff. This really could have been so great, but it's like all of the bad parts of a movie that could have been so great. So let me know what you guys think. I thought this movie was incredibly frustrating. Also, like I say, the Venom The Last Dance is so stupid, but at least it's so goofy like all the time. This movie is goofy at parts, but then there's just boring chase scenes and scenes where they have to get a MacGuffin, and it just seems like it takes forever. So let me know what you guys think. Red One, in my opinion, is terrible. Garcia is all I will say. He's the key, guys. If they had seriously had more Garcia, I swear, this could have been great. Maybe they didn't want CG to have like a polar bear accompanying them all the time, but then again, they have a whole snowman fight. I don't know. Let me know how you guys think this movie could have been better. There are so many things they could have done right. Just look at Elf. Look at any great Christmas movie and see what this movie does compared to that. So guys, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Garcia forever.